Today, we are taking a closer look at one of the most frequently discussed topics surrounding the Iraqi dinar, the idea of removing zeros from Iraq's currency. This subject has generated enormous interest among dinar followers, but it is also an area where terminology can easily become confusing. So, in this report, we are going to separate the economic reality from speculation and explain what deleting zeros would actually mean for Iraqi currency holders, Iraq's economy, and the international value of the dinar. The first and most important point is this: removing zeros from a currency is not automatically the same thing as increasing the currency's exchange rate. These are two different monetary operations. A redenomination, sometimes described as deleting zeros, changes the numerical units used to represent prices, wages, deposits, and banknotes. A revaluation or exchange rate adjustment changes the currency's value relative to another currency. Understanding this distinction is essential when analyzing any future Iraqi dinar reform. The basic idea behind deleting zeros is relatively straightforward. Imagine that a country has experienced a long period of inflation and economic instability. Over time, prices rise and larger banknotes becomes necessary for ordinary transactions. Instead of paying for goods with small denominations, consumers begin carrying notes with thousands, tens of thousands, or even higher face values. Eventually, the monetary system can become cumbersome. A government and central bank may then consider a redenomination. In simple terms, three zeros could potentially be removed from the face value of the currency. Under such a system, a 25,000 dinar note could become a 25 dinar note, while prices and financial balances would be converted using the same official ratio. The important part is that the purchasing power does not automatically change merely because the numbers printed on the notes become smaller. For example, if a product currently costs 25,000 dinars and a redenomination removes three zeros, that product could theoretically be priced at 25 new dinars. If someone had 250,000 old dinars in a bank account, that balance could become 250 new dinars. The number changes, but the underlying economic value is intended to remain equivalent. This is why redenomination should not automatically be interpreted as a sudden windfall for currency holders. This distinction is especially important when discussing the Iraqi dinar. Iraq has spent years working through the consequences of inflation, monetary instability, banking sector weaknesses, and the legacy of large denomination currency. The Central Bank of Iraq has also pursued reforms aimed at improving monetary stability, strengthening the banking system, and modernizing financial infrastructure. There is historical context behind the large denominations currently circulating in Iraq. During periods of severe economic disruption and inflation, higher value notes became increasingly necessary. The existence of a 25,000 dinar banknote, for example, does not by itself mean that the note has enormous international purchasing power. Its value depends on the exchange rate and the broader economic conditions supporting the currency. This brings us to a critical point for Iraqi dinar followers. Suppose, purely as a mathematical illustration, that a 25,000 dinar note were converted into a 25 dinar note during a redenomination. That does not mean the original 25,000 dinars suddenly become $25,000 or that the holder receives an automatic increase in wealth. The currency units have simply been changed according to a conversion ratio. The same principle applies to bank deposits, salaries, contracts, taxes, and domestic prices. A properly implemented redenomination is designed to convert the entire monetary system consistently. If three zeros are removed, the relevant prices and financial balances would generally be adjusted by the same factor. Otherwise, the reform would create massive distortions throughout the economy. This is where some online discussions become misleading. You may hear an example suggesting that if the dinar were valued at $3 per unit, a 25,000 dinar note would somehow become worth $75,000. But that calculation assumes that the entire 25,000 dinar amount is being valued at $3 per current dinar. It is not a consequence of deleting zeros. If a 25,000 dinar note becomes a 25 dinar note through a 1,000 to 1 redenomination, then the new 25 unit note represents the same underlying purchasing power as the old 25,000 unit note, assuming the redenomination is neutral. Its international value would still depend on the actual exchange rate established by the monetary authorities and determined through the applicable exchange rate regime. This is one of the most important facts to remember. Removing zeros does not create purchasing power out of thin air. An actual increase in the international value of the Iraqi dinar would require a separate change in the exchange rate framework or market value of the currency. Such a change would depend on economic fundamentals, monetary policy, foreign exchange reserves, inflation, fiscal policy, oil revenues, trade conditions, confidence in the banking system, and the credibility of Iraq's institutions. So, what would deleting zeros potentially mean for the Iraqi economy? In the short term, the process could make cash transactions and accounting easier. Smaller numerical denominations could simplify pricing, bookkeeping, cash handling, and financial reporting. Businesses might find it easier to display prices and manage transactions. Banks would also have to update their systems, ATMs, accounting software, payment infrastructure, and customer records. However, a redenomination would also involve significant logistical challenges. Iraq would need a carefully coordinated transition between old and new notes. The public would need extensive education to understand the conversion. Banks and businesses would need to prevent confusion and protect consumers from fraudulent pricing. There would also need to be clear rules concerning the exchange of old notes, deadlines, accounting conversions, and legal contracts. There is another issue that matters greatly: inflation expectations. A successful redenomination depends heavily on maintaining monetary stability. If people believe that the reform is simply cosmetic and that inflation will return, confidence could weaken. But if the central bank maintains credible monetary policy, keeps inflation under control, and continues strengthening the financial system, a redenomination could potentially support a more modern and efficient currency structure. For the long term, the more important question is not whether zeros are removed from Iraqi banknotes. The bigger question is whether Iraq continues improving the fundamentals behind its currency. Those fundamentals include controlling inflation, strengthening public finances, improving the banking sector, expanding electronic payments, increasing confidence in Iraqi financial institutions, improving regulatory standards, and maintaining adequate foreign exchange management. Iraq's oil revenues also remain extremely important because the country's fiscal and external position is closely connected to the energy sector. For Dinar followers, this means that the most meaningful developments to watch are not simply rumors about a new banknote design or claims about a particular future exchange rate. Pay attention to official announcements from the Central Bank of Iraq, changes in monetary policy, banking reforms, inflation data, foreign exchange conditions, government fiscal decisions, and internationally recognized economic indicators. It is also important to understand that A currency reform can involve several stages. A country could redenominate its currency without changing its real exchange rate value. It could adjust its exchange rate regime separately. Or, in theory, different monetary reforms could be implemented together. These possibilities should not be automatically combined into one prediction. That distinction matters because online discussions sometimes delete the zeros, revaluation, reinstatement, and exchange rate increase as if they were interchangeable terms. They are not. For example, if three zeros were removed from the currency, someone holding 5 million old dinars could potentially receive 5,000 new dinars under a 1,000 to 1 conversion. That person has not lost 99.9% of their purchasing power because prices, balances, and other monetary values would also be converted, but neither has the person automatically gained 1,000 times more wealth. The denomination has changed. The international exchange rate would then be applied to the new currency unit according to the official exchange rate framework. This is why investors and currency holders should be extremely cautious about calculations that multiply the face value of old Iraqi banknotes by an assumed future exchange rate. Such calculations can produce enormous theoretical numbers, but they do not establish that a central bank will adopt that exchange rate. At the moment, the responsible approach is to distinguish confirmed monetary policy from speculation. If Iraq officially announces a redenomination plan, the details will matter enormously. The authorities would need to explain the conversion ratio, the timetable, treatment of old notes, banking procedures, pricing rules, and the relationship between the new currency units and the existing exchange rate system. Until such information is officially established, claims about a specific future value should be treated as forecasts or speculation rather than confirmed financial developments. The broader economic story, however, remains worth watching. Iraq has significant natural resources, a large oil sector, a young population, and substantial potential for economic development. At the same time, the country faces challenges involving fiscal dependence on oil, banking, modernization, public sector spending, infrastructure, and financial sector development. For the Iraqi dinar, sustainable improvement ultimately depends on these fundamentals. A healthier economy can strengthen confidence in the national currency, but that process takes more than simply changing the number printed on a banknote. So, when you hear the phrase, delete the zeros, remember the key distinction. Redenomination changes the unit of account. It does not automatically multiply the currency's real purchasing power. An exchange rate change is a separate monetary decision. For Iraqi dinar followers, this is the most important takeaway from today's analysis. Watch the official policy, watch the economic data, and avoid treating hypothetical exchange rate scenarios as guaranteed outcomes. Currency reforms can be significant, but their real impact depends on how they are designed, implemented, and supported by broader economic policy. We will continue monitoring developments involving Iraq's monetary policy, banking reforms, exchange rate framework, inflation, and the Central Bank of Iraq so you can understand what is actually happening rather than simply following rumors. Thank you for watching Iraqi Dinar News. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video for responsible and factual Iraqi dinar updates. Remember, this content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.